Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Comedian Paula Poundstone performs live at the Birchmere in Alexandria, Virginia for 3 nights, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We got a preview of her routine and discussed the art of finding the humor from pandemic peculiarities. Hey, Paula Poundstone, thanks for joining us on WTOP again.
Well, thanks so much for having me. You know what I'm doing right now? I'm sitting in a chair counting the minutes. I love the Birchmere.
Why is that? Why is it intimate? The way it's laid out?
It is. I mostly work theaters. There's like 4 clubs that I work in the country, and the Birchmere is one of them. Partly because they treat me nice, partly because I love the audience there. The clubs that I work are all music clubs. There's something about just being in the Birchmere. I feel like I'm standing among the notes of the musicians that have been there before, and it's it's a storied music club, and I have an audience that comes to see me that is so much fun.
Oh yeah, fun audience, smart audience. Everyone knows the politics and DC is definitely a good crowd for sure.
It is a great crowd. I do the time honored talking to the audience, where are you from, what do you do for a living, and they'll say, I'm a social worker, or I'm a teacher, or I'm a plumber, but I know they're all CIA. And that's part of what's joyful about it.
Yeah, there's no better way to do a CIA undercover than to go, in a toilet as a plumber. Then no one's going to know who you are.
Yeah, no one ever guessed.
Well, last time we talked with you, I believe it was like right around election day. And so believe it or not, a lot has happened since then. I mean, who knew when we were talking around election? Who knew that the Capitol would get sieged on January 6th and all the rest? So, man, I mean, do you fold a lot of that stuff in, and COVID? God, do you fold all that into the routine?
I do. I mean, I am not a political expert, and I don't pretend to be one. I'm not a historian, nor a constitutional aficionado. I talk about, what I take in as a voter, and trying to sort of make sense of it. And of course, that's harder and harder to do as time goes on. I'm not certain that Putin hasn't just plain put something in our water like Simon Bar-Sinister from Underdog would have done. I feel like we've gone insane. I mean, not everybody, but lots. And maybe it's, maybe those who haven't yet gone insane are about to. I don't know. So it's I talk about trying to figure it all out. I think some of my theories are valid.
Oh yeah, well, at least some of them are, I'm sure.
Some of them, sure.
But it's seriously, it is an insane time to be alive. When did you get back out, touring, COVID wise? Like, how long have you been back out on the road?
Well, in the course of that 15 months, I did 2 jobs. One was, in fact, at the Birchmere, and the other was at a small place up in Maine. And the reason I was able to do those is A, they followed the CDC protocols, but B, because they're clubs that serve food, the rules were different than in the theater. But then, remember in like May and June, where we thought mistakenly, yeah, we got this. Remember that like kind of little happy time right in there? I started back.
Oh, I remember it well. And then it went away.
It did kind of go away. But anyways, I started back on the road like officially then in June. And I mean, now I feel like I'm sort of back to work regular. I ask, of course, that people be vaccinated and masked. It depends what state I'm in, whether or not the venue itself asks that, but I ask it of my audience members for 2 reasons. Number one, I love them, and I don't want anybody to die. And number 2, it just doesn't make sense as a business model to kill your audience. So, and number 2, by the way, is way far underneath number 1.
You don't want to kill the audience.
No, it just doesn't seem right.
I mean, when they say, "Oh, you killed it out there," that's not what they're talking about.
No, we're hoping not. All the language surrounding, successful performing does tend to be violent.
That's true. Why is it? You're like, hey, go break a leg, kill it out
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Well, I think the original idea of break a leg was that you was sort of opposite talk. I think.
Oh.
I'm not really certain, but anyways, yeah, it does tend to have a violent tone. But I don't really want. I want people to be vaccinated, wear masks. Sometimes people think, oh, it's going to be so hard to wear a mask through a whole show. You know what? It really isn't. After after a little while, you kind of forget about it entirely, and everybody else is masked, and it's so much more comfortable than a ventilator, I'm told.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah, so I'm all for it.
And back in
By
the
the way,
day,
I
back in
wish
the
when people were finished with their masks, they would just put them in the trash. Have you noticed how many are on the street?
I can't believe it. Yeah, what my wife and I were walking down the sidewalk. There was one right in front of our house on the sidewalk. We went for a hike out in nature, trying to, just you think you're safe from everything, and people have just hung their mask on like a tree limb right along the trail. Like, how hard is it just to put it in your
Yeah,
pocket?
honestly. Although I have to say, I had a great mask that somebody had given me. It had Fauci on the front of it, and I really loved it. And one day I realized it wasn't in my pocket. And I think probably while I was walking, I went to pull the phone out because I had another mask on, and I went to pull the phone out and it dropped. So I perhaps have added one mask to the collection on the street. But I went back. I went back out to look. I couldn't find it. It's like what masks have become? They've become the discarded masks are like those weird little plastic dental floss things that are all over the street. What the hell is that?
It used to be it used to be gum, and then it was floss, and now it's masks apparently.
But I don't understand who's flossing while they're walking around because ew. And why wouldn't you throw that away after you used it? I mean, it just doesn't make the floss thing is just plain weird.
You think be stationary in front of a mirror would be the best way to do it? Like, how do you do it when you're moving down the street?
I would think. Apparently, there's a certain population of skilled athletic flossers that are also non-environmentalists. It does seem like a really, really weird thing. But anyways, now it's been one-upped by masks for sure.
Oh yeah, well you can't really floss with the mask over your face, but yeah, I mean I don't know. You're right. That's fascinating. I'm glad you pointed that out because I have
don't
seen
know.
masks strewn about. I mean, maybe they're like breadcrumbs, Hansel and Gretel leading us to somewhere if we follow the masks on the ground.
Yeah, I probably should. I think they go to hell and back.
Which we've all been through. I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
I know we're not trying to make light of a serious subject. It's so tragic, and you almost have to laugh to stop from crying. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do right now because it has been a crazy almost 2 years now. It really has been.
Honestly, it's kind of shifted. Like, it's kind of we definitely are numbed to certain things. Like when you hear about a death. We don't feel about it, or I don't. I can't speak for everybody, but it seems like we don't feel about it the same way. I mean, the numbers are still shocking, and yet there's a lot of people that were mask wearers that are like I'm told, for example, that Bill Maher has said, "Oh, it's over with now. Why is everyone still wearing masks?" Like, it's not over. It's not over. To go. You just got so comfortable with the numbers. That like that it's a very strange perspective, and the stress of it I think we've just internalized to such a degree that you don't even realize anymore. Like my memory, which was never good, is totally shot now. Like my short term, it used to be that I didn't know why I had walked into a room. And now I often don't know what room I'm in. It's that it's a stress thing. Are you having that with your memory during this period?
Yeah, well, it's weird. It's like this 2 years almost. It's like a blur where, you know what I mean? You're right. It's hard to remember things. What did that happen like a week ago or a year ago or 2 years ago? But I mean, there definitely is like a line of demarcation though in my mind of like, everyone calls it the before times, which it it was 2 years ago, which is a long time, but still, it seems like forever ago. It feels like 20 years ago that we were out being normal.
Yeah, I feel, yeah, my head feels like Putin's snow globe. Yeah, I just constantly feel like somebody just shook it up somehow. Yeah, it's a very strange thing. I will say that because I've been home, people, as if we're not in a dramatic enough time, people have the nerve to refer to, they'll say on lockdown, that we were on lockdown. I don't know about the rest of you, but my house locks from the inside. I was never on a lockdown. We were on a stay-at-home order. And even that was porous. Even that is too strong a term, because you could go to the grocery store where, do you remember in the beginning how terrified everyone looked in the grocery store?
Oh yeah, it was like Dawn of the Dead or something. You're like, stay away from me.
Yeah, the grocery stores tried to do that thing where they put the arrows in the aisles, so every aisle was one way. Did they do that where you live?
Yeah, honestly, we've been doing grocery orders. We ventured out once, like that first week, and then after that we were like, screw this, we're getting Amazon, or not Amazon, we're getting Walmart and Instacart to our doorstep. So we've avoided the arrows.
That would never even occur to me. Well, at one point the grocery stores were doing this thing, and they were doing their best, but they did this thing where they put arrows on each aisle, and so each aisle was a one way. And honestly, I had as hard a time with that as I do cities that have a bunch of one ways. If I passed, an aisle, like, guess what? If I didn't pick up rice when I was in the rice aisle, I ain't getting rice. It would take me an hour to get back there. I couldn't figure out how to navigate the arrows in such a way. And the other thing is, I have my mask on and I wear glasses. And so my glasses were fogged up. I kept buying stuff I didn't want. Wait a minute, somebody's calling. Oh my heavens.
Speaking of things you don't want, a phone ringing.
Yeah, phone ringing.
Happens to the best of us.
It's a big part of my life. Well, I have more than one phone too, so that really throws people.
You have a burner.
I talk. I'm talking to you right now on a goofy Zoom thing, but my regular phone number is a flip phone.
You still in the flip phone era?
I love flip phones. They're so much easier. I mean, I don't text, texting on a flip phone is just absurd. But I don't like to text anyways, because it's, let me think of the right word, stupid. People would be so much better off just talking to each other. Honestly, we make a mistake, but I think it's part of the reason, by the way, that the insanity has struck us the way that it has. This lack of casual contact, as well as with people that you know better. But you can go, like, my regular grocery store. They have this section now of self-checkout. I refuse. I will stand in a long line. I'm not doing self-checkout, because the few seconds where I'm standing there and I say to the clerk, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And I say to the guy bagging, or the woman bagging my stuff, and I say, gosh, I like your hair like that. Those few seconds of exchange are important. That is what makes us human beings. At that, and we all have podcasts. Those are the two things that make us human beings. And we don't eat our young. That's the other one. But without that, we just get sort of, literally dehumanized. I don't like all this robotic stuff. We need each other. I realize that's a crazy concept, but we do.
No, we really do. And I think you're learning that more and more, as the longer this thing drags on. And it's we desperately miss that social interaction. And it's like, hey, the guy bagging my groceries, that's the most social interaction I've had in a year.
Honestly, I got to say, though, I do love people. I had one of the most meaningful exchanges of my life. I was trying to walk to somebody's condo, actually in DC. And I was coming from Crystal City, and I don't know what made me think I could walk, given that I have zero sense of direction and really iffy orientation. But I was trying. And so I was walking through this very cementy highway-y part, and there was a guy that was a sign spinner. He was a guy holding up a sign for like a mattress store going out of sale, going out of business or something. And he was in the midst of all these little sort of islands of asphalt and cement. And I think I must have asked him directions or something. And we got into a conversation. I hope I never forget it as long as I live. He was so uplifting.
What did you talk about?
I think I think I said something about my inability to function well in the world or something. And he said to me as I was leaving, when we parted ways, he said, "You keep your head up," and it was so moving to me. This guy spinning a sign out, right? And he was so encouraging and so kind. And I have a bad memory, so who knows what I'll remember, but I hope I never forget that. And I wish I could find the guy again, but part of the beauty of it was that I didn't know him and he didn't know me. Well, those exchanges are important. I was in therapy, with one person and another forever. Lord knows how much money I wasted and how much time I spent. 2 seconds with this guy meant more to me than anything anybody else has ever said to me, I think.
See, all you had to do is go to the sign spinner.
Yeah, sign spinner. I'm not suggesting that every sign spinner is going to be a fountain of life. But on the other hand, my son said something meaningful to me once when he was about, 8 years old, 10 years old. He said, "Mom, when you die, what do I get?" That was touching. That was very touching. I said, "Dad, and I want you to have it."
Yeah. Where there's a will, there's a way. There's an heirloom.
Where there's a will, there's a dollar.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe the sign spinning gentleman is listening to WTOP. Maybe he's listening to this, and maybe he'll be able to track you down at the Birchmere. Who knows?
I wish. Yeah, that would be great. I'd like to be reunited with the sign spinner. And don't every sign spinner come up to me and try to tell me that was you, because I'm not going to believe it.
You'll know. You will know that when you hear their voice again. You'll remember.
There was a beauty about this sign spinner that was, palpable and penetrating, and not just anybody could be him.
Gotcha. We've covered a lot: COVID and politics and sign spinners and technology, flip phones. I mean, I assume all this will make it into the routine.
I don't exactly know what I'm going to talk about, but I have 10 cats and 2 big dogs, and they often make their way into my, stage thoughts. In fact, right while I'm speaking, both of my large dogs are laying beside me, just riveted to my every word.
Are they the easiest audience or the toughest audience? Like if a joke works on them, then it'll work on the Birchmere.
I'll tell you, they are no help whatsoever with my act. But I have to say, my cats, I got 2 kittens in the spring, and one is black and one is tortoiseshell. It's Lawson and Nash. And they do this thing where I'll be sitting in the living room on the floor working, and the black cat chases the tortoiseshell cat out of the room. The black cat's bigger. He chases the tortoiseshell cat out of the room. And then a couple seconds go by, and the tortoiseshell cat chases the black cat back into the room. That cat joke lays me out every single time I fall for that. That is a great cat joke. So I think my cats actually have some comedy writing skill.
I think they do. It's the tortoise and the hairball.
Yeah, the tortoise and the hairball. That'd be a great children's story.
There you go. Well, you've been generous with your time, but hop off here and go ahead and put pen to paper. You can write that one right now.
Yeah, I may, and I'll give you credit. I'm keeping the money, but I'll give you some credit.
Again, everyone, Paula Poundstone is coming to the Birchmere November 19th, 20th, and 21st. So 3 nights. Get your tickets now. Thanks so much.
It was great talking with you. Take care. Stay safe.
It's fascinating to compare that conversation with the one we had last November, right after the election of President Joe Biden.
I'm happy to be here.
Here we are again. Now we're talking again with you after a completely different bonkers election. What's your thoughts on the past week of, it took 5 days for Biden to be declared the winner. President Trump still not conceding. What do you make of all of it?
It's insane. That's what it is. I was at the Birchmere in Alexandria, Virginia, in 2016. It was, the election, of course, was on a Tuesday, and then I was at the Birchmere on that weekend, and the whole crowd had this feeling that we would never recover, and little did we know that 4 years later we would still be climbing out of the morass. I don't even know what to make of it. I can't. Every day, like, it's hard to plan. You say, well, I think I'm going to do blah, 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 unless we're hiding from white gang members behind rocks. It's a crazy time. And, I have a theory that we should all be keeping journals for future generations, especially digestive journals, because I feel that people in the future need to know to what level we've been affected. I think that maybe Trump has some sort of investment in what kind of medicine with, pills for your digestion, because I don't know about the rest of you, but for me, everything has been affected.
Absolutely. How did you digest the election? Where did you watch the results come in? I guess it's different than past years. It wasn't just, one night event. It kind of drew out over a whole week.
Yeah. In fact, I watched on the night of the election, I watched on the NewsHour on my television until it got, really, really late. And boy, that Judy Woodruff was still there doing her job. But I'm like, you know what? And I knew, because they had said so on the NewsHour and they had said so on MSNBC. They did a good job, I thought, the news media, of telling people that we probably weren't going to know, on the first night. And so I went to bed the first night, and I got up the next morning, and I figured out how to make the news play through my iPhone, which I never had done before. And I put it in my pocket, and I walked around with the news doing chores for the next, I don't know, what was it, 3 days, 4 days? I don't even remember, but I watched.
Might have even been 5. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They called it Saturday. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I walked around with the news in my pocket, listening for about four days. I mean, if I walked too far from the house, the signal cut off. But for the most part, it was my constant companion, little Steve Kornacki in my pocket. There's something about it that makes you want to go out and throw a ball around with him. He's got a very childlike countenance.
Right. It's gonna take months to pump all the coffee out of him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's impressive what him and John King and all those people at their magic boards. I don't know how they stood on their feet that long.
Yeah. Well, I think I kept talking about Kornacki, I think, would take little naps and stuff. But all of them, I mean, all those news people, I was amazed when Judy Woodruff was on the news, like, on Wednesday. I thought, well, surely she'll, they'll just because sometimes she does take a break and somebody else anchors that night. I thought, well, surely somebody else will anchor the following night. But there she was. First of all, you get the sense that somebody like her, anyways, they seem to live for this stuff. Right. So I think there's part of them that are citizens and feel like, oh my gosh, what's happening to our republic? And then there's part of them that are like, oh boy, can't wait to tell about this.
Right, exactly.
It wasn't boring. I mean, I wasn't bored for a second.
Well, what do you think what do you think we need to do now? Are you hoping for the peaceful transition of power? I mean, I've never seen it challenged so much like this.
Yeah, of course I'm hoping for the peaceful transition of power. It's tough to predict what Trump is going to do. This thing last night about that blonde lady not signing the paper that she needs to sign, is frustrating at best. And I think he's going to fire everybody who he thinks is disloyal. And I think he's going to put in place people that are not qualified, but that will back him up. And I think it's probably going to get ugly for at least a little while. And one thing I heard last night was that the year of Gore v. Bush, there's some analysis, I guess, by the intelligence community that says that 9/11 we would have been better prepared for had those 36 days not taken place. That we were behind in the transition. We were behind in putting people in positions, in him making his nominations or hiring people, and that made us more vulnerable. So I want to say two things. One thing is I hope that Trump gets over himself and gets out of there. And I also want to say I'm happy to serve as the head of any one of those organizations just till we can stay safe.
Well, you do have some experience. I think last time we spoke, you said you ran for sixth grade class president. Is that right?
Yes, and I keep thinking of that because I think, I conceded right away. It was me and Amy Hayes, and I went down. It was a tight race as far as I know, and yeah. And, it's funny because I think it was Fox that said that we needed to give Trump time to emotionally accept his defeat. Like, okay, is that in the Constitution? Do they say that? Did our forefathers say, let the loser have some space?
There's an emotional clause in there somewhere, an amendment, the emotional amendment in there.
Yeah, the emotional amendment. It got put in the 70s. No, I don't think we do need to do that. I think he needs to get out. He's, I don't know. He's just such a spoiler. My guess is right now he's having the blue room painted pink. He's just going to screw things up before he gets out of there. The other thing I don't understand is how can Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham support this thing about, oh yeah, they cheated on those ballots, Okay, but then doesn't that invalidate their election as well?
It would be a pretty crazy conspiracy to do it in all those 6 states just on the presidential level, but then allow McConnell to stay in the Senate. In the Senate, it would take a massive conspiracy to pull it off that nuanced.
Yeah. It strikes me that it would, but yeah. But what we used ballots when Amy Hayes won. I was trying to think if we used a different method that was maybe easier to understand. No, I believe we used ballots. And by the way, in 6th grade politics, the hardest thing about writing a speech is that there are no issues. You really have no. Even when you're class president in the 6th grade, you control nothing. I remember she had a suggestion box, and the reason she had a suggestion box is because suggestions about what?
Yeah, I remember.
You were not anything. The curriculum, the lunch, nothing.
Right, exactly. I was 5th grade class president. I think the most I got to do was shovel dirt on a new tree we planted. That's it. That is it. You run promising maybe some candy to the students. That's all you know. There's nothing you're in control of then. It's much different.
No, I in my speech, my campaign speech, I said that I would get the school to give us a soda machine, and that the teacher and some other kids said it too in their speeches. And the teacher, took us aside and said, you guys, you can't say that because you wouldn't be able to get the school to give you a soda machine. So in essence, it's true. And imagine how badly that prepared us for adult politics.
So true. That's so true. Well, remind our listeners really fast before we run. We spoke a lot about this last time you were with us, but You were born in Alabama in 59. You were bussing tables at IHOP. Remind them really quick how you got into comedy and made your way to San Fran.
I did used to work at the IHOP, by the way, the International House of Pancakes, but I believe Trump has taken us out of that now. How did I get started? I worked at the International House of Pancakes in Orlando, Florida, and then I came back to Massachusetts. I went to Florida because I wanted to be a bear in the Disney World Parade, and yet I didn't get hired. And so I came back to Massachusetts. I was bussing tables at a salad bar place for a living, and there was I went to see actually a band at the Ding Ho in Cambridge, and there was a flyer on the wall that said they had comedy there every other Sunday night. And I went to see a comedy show, and I got to tell you, it was pretty bad. And but I was like, yeah, you know what? I can do that. And so they began having open mic nights at some point, and I jumped in with both feet. And so it's not like I turned my back on a law degree. I was 19 years old, and after about a year of telling little jokes in Boston at mostly open mic nights, I got on a Greyhound bus, and I went all around the country and up into Canada to see what comedy clubs were like in different cities. And I ended up, when I got to San Francisco, I so fell in love with the audience that I just didn't leave. And that's where I was for a long, long time.
Yeah, and once you were on the West Coast, tell me how important it was. I mean, I know Robin Williams, he changed your life. He discovered you. And also Dana Carvey, too. But explain how much those two, rest in peace to Robin, but how much they totally, changed your life.
Well, the truth is, any comic my age or younger owes a debt of gratitude to Robin Williams. Because now, I started in 79. By that time, Robin was already a big, huge star. Mork and Mindy was well up and running. He was just about to do Popeye, which I never saw it. My understanding is it wasn't a particularly great film, but there was certainly a lot of interest in it. And the excitement that he created, he certainly didn't invent stand-up comedy. It's been around since we were in caves, I imagine. But the renewed excitement in that form of entertainment that he created was all over the country, in part because he toured a lot. Any chance he could, he was on stage. And when, he could be at an amphitheater in Cincinnati, to 3,000 people or something. And when he came off stage, he would go to, Uncle Funny's Yuck House. He just did. And so there was this almost a palpable electricity around the country with this feeling that Robin Williams might stop by. And in San Francisco, because he lived there, there was more probability that he would stop by. And this made audiences come out, in part hoping to see him. And when they saw the rest of us, they kind of liked us. But he really almost single-handedly created a renewed interest in stand-up comedy. And otherwise, I certainly wouldn't have been able to make a living at it.
For sure. And then I know, you were touring for a while there in different places, but I know you became a household name in our living rooms with Jay Leno's Tonight Show, because I remember you were reporting from the conventions. Memories of that? Yeah,
I did. It was, you know what? It was my manager's idea. And it's not like it was right after Jay took over the Tonight Show from Johnny Carson. And partly the idea was that I take my ignorance on the road. I followed politics by that time in my life, but I was still relatively new. For example, I was a sort of a roving reporter for the Tonight Show, like for the week of the Democratic convention and then the week of the Republican convention. And I had certainly never been to a convention before, and I hadn't watched very much of them either, but I had watched some, enough that I remember standing in one of the places, I forget, might have been the Republican convention that year was at the Houston Astrodome, I believe. And, or was in Houston anyways. And I remember seeing these hand carts stacked with Bush posters. And I was blown away because I thought people brought their own. I thought people like the way they did for Black Lives Matter. I thought people went into their garages or their, out on the sidewalk with their spray paint and made Black Lives Matter sign and tacked it to a board and carried it. But so much of the conventions were, scripted, and it was theater. And I was very surprised by that. Because I really had thought it was much more organic. But yeah, so I did the week in each place, and then that went so successfully. And when I did it, Jay would go to me like a couple times a night during the show and, ask where I was standing, and I would make a couple of jokes and tell about what I saw. But really, I think the reason it was effective was that I just didn't know that much about it. And so I was kind of discovering it as I told people, and it wasn't like the nitty gritty of politics that I was talking about by any stretch. But I think that my guess is partly because of cable news, which obviously has been, things like Fox News or OAN or these things where they just tell you, absolute crap, have not been helpful to the country. But my guess is some of the dynamics of politics people know more about now than they used to, as a result of, I don't know, all the podcasts and all the, and all the cable networks and things like that. But back then, I don't know. I think there were a lot of people that were in my situation, which is we just really didn't know that much about it.
Right. And now everybody knows about it. And stand-ups like yourself are almost, you're coming to the Birchmere, you're almost expected to try to help us make sense of it. I mean, Chappelle, for instance, this is twice he's been tasked to try to bring the country together and make us laugh on, the SNL following 2016 and 2020. What did you see Dave's set?
I didn't. I saw that he had been there and that it was successful and that he was credited with this, amazing set doing just what you described, but I did not see it. I don't watch a lot of other comics anymore, partly because I want to know that whatever I say came from me.
You want to feel like you invented the material.
Yeah, because sometimes, sometimes you inadvertently, you hear something somewhere else and you sort of forget that you heard it somewhere else, and somehow it works its way. I'll tell you, 1,000 years ago, when I lived in San Francisco, I lived with a guy who worked at a magic shop. And I was always broke. And because he had, a full-time day job, he had money, not a lot, but he had some money. So every now and then I would face the humiliation of going to him and asking if I could borrow like $5 or something, right? And he was a really nice guy. And so he would always loan me a little bit of money. But when he did it, he would take like a $20 bill or a $5 bill or whatever, and he would fold it and he would wrap it around his finger, and then he would say, "Oh, wait, here it is," and he'd pull it out of my ear because he was a magician. And so I thought to myself, boy, the thing about magic is that it's just humiliating. It's like, here's a quarter, now it's gone, you're an idiot. And so one night I go to see some other comics. I didn't, Jerry Seinfeld was a headliner, but that's all he was. It wasn't no Seinfeld show yet. So I go with some friends to see Jerry Seinfeld one night, very soon thereafter that incident. And I swear I am not making this up. he does a routine where he says, "What's magic?" It's, just makes you feel stupid.
Right.
Here's a quote. Now it's gone. You're an idiot. I swear. I had never seen him before. I had never heard of him. I wrote that piece. I had never done it on stage. And there he says it.
My theory on that is that these jokes are like hovering out there in the stratosphere at around the same time based on what's going on in politics or culture. And then those of you like Jerry or you're kind of tap into it around the same time. It has to be that. I mean, it's impossible that you guys wouldn't make that joke at the same time.
Right. And but I mean, although that's not a time sensitive joke. I happened to have lived with a magician. I don't think Jerry Seinfeld lived with a magician, but we came to that joke separately. But if I had gone on stage and done it without having seen, without knowing he did it, everybody would say,
True.
"Oh, well, Paula Poundstone stole from Jerry Seinfeld." And so that's why I just got in the habit of not watching other comics. There was something I was going to tell you about that. Oh, I know, on Twitter. No. So I'm listening to Pod Save America the other day, and someone called Steve Bannon Vanilla Isis. I thought it was so damn funny that I tweeted about it. And I said, one of the guys from Pod Save America just called Steve Bannon Vanilla Isis. And I said, I bow down to them. That is just too funny. And then somebody else on Twitter writes, "Oh, Malcolm Nance wrote that like a few days ago." And I'm sure the same thing. I'm sure Malcolm Nance, who is not a comic for a living, nor are the Pod Save America guys, but I'm sure one didn't steal it from the other. I'm sure it just came up. But same thing. In that case, I could see where the idea came to both people separately.
Totally.
So,
in case our listeners missed it, that was all reference to Bannon calling for Fauci to be beheaded, and that's why he's been getting banned from a lot of stuff. So
yeah,
Vanilla Isis.
I didn't even want to repeat the words. It's so shocking. By the way, do you think I hope that Fauci will be on the new, in some form, if he wants to be on the new coronavirus task force. I don't know. I mean, it's not like I know the guy, but I've listened to him a lot, and they interview him on the news hour sometimes, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I would take a vaccine unless he told me to.
Right.
If he said it's good to go, then I'm all in. But I don't know. Well, I guess if Biden's team did, I would be okay with it. But I mean, if Trump says it, I'll just take the virus and put it beside the bleach in the cleaning cabinet and leave it at that. You don't know what's it. I mean, there could be. I know I trust Biden. He has a rescue dog. That's it. He's in.
Dog's back to the White House. All right. Well, in closing, I mean, you kind of took us there anyway with COVID, but is this your first, tour back doing live shows, limited capacity? I mean, this whole year has been a complete insane ride of not being able to have public events. So, for a stand-up comedian like yourself, I mean, where are you in dipping your toe back in the water there?
Well, first of all, I love the Birchmere. I work theaters all around the country, work theaters. And I had a very full schedule. I'm usually booked close to a year out. And so in March, like everybody else's life, things shifted. And as it happens, there are maybe four clubs in the country, music clubs, that I've continued to work for years just because I love them. One was the Birchmere. Another one was a place called Jonathan's in Ogunquit, Maine. So Jonathan's was able to do a similar thing in July, where they move the table and, people wear masks and they follow the CDC guidelines of the for the state. So I was there in July, and I haven't been on stage since then and even with the Birchmere, like every day we say, every time I have to make a plan, I say, well, I think I'm going to Virginia in November, because things seem so up in the air all the time. But I believe it's close enough now that, yes, I'm going to the Birchmere this weekend. And I can't wait. As I say, it was the first job that I did in 2016 after Trump was elected. And there was something so magical about being with that group of people on those nights. I mean, our laughter was like explosive. It was so healing to be together. And although I've come back to the Birchmere every year, in the ensuing 4 years, I would say that this time around, once again, it will serve an almost medicinal purpose.
That's so great. Yeah. The energy in that room is, once again, like you experienced 4 years ago, will be unreal. Stuff you'll probably remember for your whole career, because the elections are sort of benchmarks, of where you are in time. So it's really cool that we at the Birchmere in DC area get to experience your thoughts every 4 years here. So hey, thanks so much.
Yeah, it was nice talking with you. Take care.
And for another fascinating time capsule, here's our chat from November 2016, just days before the election of former President Donald Trump. Paula, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Your shows are the weekend following right after the election. What could we possibly have to laugh about?
Honestly, I feel like the entire country is now like Rosemary and Rosemary's Baby. Like we know we're giving birth to the devil, but we just want to get it out.
What have you done to its eyes?
Such a horrible, awful process, and just everything, just the whole thing. It reflects badly on all of us. The candidates are from some sort of macabre version of Alice in Wonderland, and I just keep picturing Mike Dukakis and Howard Dean drinking together. And Dukakis says, I had an ill-fitting helmet. Howard Dean says, I said woo.
Biaw.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that took him out of the race. I mean, the things that, honestly, at this point, Watergate seems like kind of a dreamlike time.
Yeah, and Howard Dean goes, love
you can talk about having your followers assassinate your opponent, and that doesn't take you out of the race. Go figure.
It's like all the old rules are suddenly thrown out this year.
Well, when I was in the 6th grade, I ran for class president. And
well, congrats.
School politics are a great idea to teach kids about our democracy. It's a great idea. But, of course, the problem in 6th grade is that there are no issues. Mm-hmm. Even if you get elected class president, you have no powers. And so it makes for a fluffy speech. So when we made our speeches, me and some other kids, too, I think, claimed that if they elected us president of the 6th grade class, that we would get a soda machine in the school. And the teacher took us aside afterwards and said, well, you can't say that because that's not true. You wouldn't be able to do that.
But that's what the politicians do.
Exactly, which in no way prepared me for adult politics.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, you should be able to say whatever you want. That's how
honestly. It goes. Well, that was back in, early 70s, I guess, right? So apparently, we've devolved to where that rule no longer applies.
Awesome. So are you, I assume at the Birchmere, if our listeners turn out, it will be a lot of politics, but do you have to tailor your jokes based on who wins Tuesday? Are you going to have to, change how you deliver some of them?
Oh, I wouldn't think so. The truth remains the truth regardless of, I shouldn't say the truth, because I don't know what the truth is, to be totally honest with you at this point. But my perceptions remain my perceptions. I should put it that way, regardless of, and even, I'll tell you, I don't tell people what to think. I don't shame them for not thinking what I think. I don't tell people how to vote, and if I did, what a strange voter that they would listen. I just, it's just my perceptions, and I always tell the crowd the caveat that I happen to be a Democrat. And I always say, but you do whatever you want. And it's just that I happen to have the microphone, and so it's my turn to talk. That's all. And if people don't, share my views in politics, which they needn't, then I can guarantee you somewhere within the evening we will find common ground, because I'm not a political analyst. I wouldn't even call myself a political comic so much as my act is largely autobiographical. And at this point in my life, because my act is largely autobiographical, I do talk about politics because we're all sort of steeped in it. But I also talk about raising a house full of kids and animals and trying to pay attention to current events well enough to be a halfway decent citizen. And my favorite part of the night is just plain talking to the audience. I do the time-honored, where are you from, what do you do for a living? And in this way, little biographies of audience members emerge. And I use that from which to set my sails. In fact, one of my favorite nights was many years ago at the Birchmere. To my left of the stage, there were these two guys, and I just began talking to them. And one of them worked in the patent office. And so I was finally able to find out why so many patents remain pending. And there's always great audience members at the Birchmere. I love it there.
Awesome. Well, speaking of the whole, who are you, where are you from? Weren't you born? You're born in Alabama. I saw you used to bust tables at IHOP. How'd you get into comedy?
Well, it's not like I was turning my back on a law degree. I was lucky. I mean, I had always wanted to be a comic, but I had absolutely no idea where the mouth of the trail was. I had no idea how to even begin. I thought at one point that I might try being like a street performer in Boston or something, but even that I wouldn't have had the slightest idea how to begin. But fortunately, in 1979, when I was bussing tables at a salad bar which, by the way, at that time was cutting edge, not bussing tables, but the salad bar.
Salad.
At a salad bar in Boston, a couple of guys started up a fledgling, right beginning comedy scene, which is supported. I mean, the pool for comics comes from having an open mic scene. So where a club has a night where anybody can go up for 5 minutes. And that's how you begin. I mean, that's college for a stand-up comic. Lots and lots and lots of it. And so I started there doing that. And then I took a Greyhound bus around the country to see what clubs were like in different cities. And ended up in San Francisco. And I never went back to live in Massachusetts after that, even though it is a great state, and I miss it a lot, particularly now. Speaking
of San Francisco, didn't Robin Williams see you out there and give you a nice little break in your career?
He did. He was a big supporter of mine. And by the way, Robin was a big supporter of lots and lots of people. Robin was the most generous man I think I've ever known. And truth be told, really nobody my generation or younger would be doing stand-up comedy at all, likely, were it not for Robin, because he, that sort of resurgence. I mean, stand-up comedy has been around since we came out of the caves, but Robin definitely was the guy who renewed interest in it, audience's interest in stand-up comedy, starting in the late 70s. I mean, by the time I showed up in San Francisco, Robin was a huge, huge star. He was coming towards the tail end of Mork and Mindy. And he was an enormous star and extraordinary in the way he went about doing what he did. That improvisation and that high energy was just, was huge chunks of fish to the dolphin audience. they loved it. And the thing about him was that he would show up everywhere. And so audiences came out really hoping to see Robin. And in the meantime, they saw the rest of us. And the cool thing about San Francisco was that audiences seemed to really enjoy getting in on the ground floor of different performers. And so I, having been lucky enough to sort of roll in there on a Greyhound bus, it wasn't really something that I planned out mentally and said, here's a great strategy. I just sort of ended up there. And because of that, I got this great base of support, both from Robin and, by the way, Dana Clarvey. Dana introduced me. Dana was also managed by the same company Robin was at the time, and they introduced me to their management, and those guys took me on for a while. And the rest will be in the Paula Poundstone Museum, I assume.
Where are you going to set that up?
The cities are making bids now.
It's like the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of there's a lot of cheating that goes on as well. A lot of corruption in the process to get the Paula Poundstone Museum in one's town.
Well, hopefully, we'll work all that out. Hopefully, you've gotten a lot of accolades. Comedy Central's 100 Greatest Stand-Ups. I think you won like Best Female Stand-Up back in like the 80s. I mean, you've done it all yourself. But how many tour dates do you do these days?
I do about 90 a year, which is a lot in my business. I do it for a couple of reasons. The first is because my job is really a healing, joyful job. I consider myself a proud member of the endorphin production industry, both for the audience that comes. And by the way, people don't have to come see me, although wouldn't that be nice? But the truth is, being in a group of people laughing is a really mentally healthy thing to do. And it's different, by the way, from watching something by yourself somewhere. The truth is, 99.9% of the times that people type LOL, it's a lie.
It's
absolutely.
absolutely.
You don't generally LOL when you're by yourself. You LOL when you're in a group of people. And a lot of times you laugh at stuff you didn't even get. It's just that the laughter is contagious. And sometimes, I know, for example, I'm a big, huge Three Stooges fan. Mm-hmm. But when in all the years I've watched them, I've generally watched them alone. And I don't know that I've ever laughed out loud. I've acknowledged in my head that I thought they were funny. Mm-hmm. But when I went to the Three Stooges Film Festival at the historic Alex Theater in Glendale, California, I was caught up in waves of laughter. And sometimes I was laughing at things that, even though I've seen those same shorts 100 times easily, I never saw that particular image, or I never paid attention to that particular joke until I heard other people laughing at it. So I'm lucky to get to do a job that just from sheer brain science is good for you. And then the other reason I work a lot is I have a tremendous amount of personal debt. I don't even have a savings account because I don't know my mom's maiden name.
Oh, yeah.
So unless I'm Tony Bennett, I'm going to, I really have to work forever. My son had the nerve to ask me one time what he got when I died. I said, debt. And I said I wanted to go specifically to you, too.
And he gets 14 cats, right?
Yeah. I was thinking at one time about leaving California. I was walking. We also have 2 German Shepherd mixed dogs. Right. So I was walking the dogs with my middle daughter one night. And I said, Allie, when you guys all go away to college and everything, I got no reason to stay in California. I don't care about California at all. I said, I'll just go to a farm in New Jersey. And Allie goes, Mom, how are you going to get 14 cats across the country to New Jersey? And I'm like, you know what? You are right. I am stuck in California.
Is the idea, how you were saying with the Stooges, and you like being in a communal setting and laughing together with other people around, tie that into, is that why you like, regularly going on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR? You like being in the group?
Oh, it's great. And, I didn't plan it that way. It just sort of worked out. They called me up and asked me. And it is so much fun. One of the beauties of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me is that, as far as I know, there's nobody has any sort of big ego about who came up with what joke. And so, we're all sort of there hoping to make the evening entertaining. And so when one person throws out, a joke, everybody sort of piles onto it. And it really is fun. In fact, somebody was telling me one day, I was doing an interview, I think, and somebody was quoting something I had said on Wait, Wait, and I go, I think Adam said that. I think I took it. As soon as he said it, I grabbed it from his hands and ran. But I think Adam did say that. It's very, very fun. We have the best audiences provided to us by public radio, I must say. But they are smart and game and willing. They everything doesn't come, especially in a show that's improvised the way much of Wait is. The panelists, and there's 3 of us each week. There's about 15 of us all together, and we rotate in no particular order that I'm aware of. We're asked questions about the week's news by our host, Peter Sagal. And Peter obviously has a script in order to be able to ask the questions and to explain the answers. But for the rest of us, we have no script. We're aware that it's based on the week's news. So I suppose if somebody, was really responsible and did their homework, they could think up jokes ahead of time. As far as I know, no one does.
Yeah.
And we talked about it before, whether or not we'd want to go that direction and sort of purposely prepare things. And I think everybody to a man said no, because it takes... we just felt like it would take. We didn't want to be pulling a scam.
Yeah.
We wanted the sort of sparks of stuff that come up to be genuine, and so we left it that way. And so far it seems to work. The only 2 things we know about ahead of time are the bluff story, where there's a real news story, and then there's 2 other fake news stories. And we write the fake news stories, and so we're told the idea, like what has to be the umbrella topic, that is. We're told that the night before. And then the other thing is, a few minutes before we go out, they usually say the final joke. They call it the prediction, that where they go, well, Paddle, if anyone, if that happens, we'll talk about it next week. Wait, don't tell me. That joke right then, we're told the premise of it. I mean, we're not told what to say, but we're told what the topic is just a few minutes before we go on.
Gotcha. Now, I know we started the interview talking about sort of how you might be doing some political stuff at the Birchmere, but a lot of our younger listeners might not know that of your stuff you did with the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. You were doing backstage presidential stuff back at the '92 campaign, right? It
was the first. It was the first Bill Clinton election he ran against the first George Bush, and it was exciting and fun. Part of the reason. It was my manager's idea, actually, and she talked to the Tonight Show, and they went with this idea, and it was simply for me to do backstage coverage at the conventions. I did the Democrats, I think, were in New York, and the Republicans were in Houston, as I recall, and then I went back. It was so successful that they had me go to the inauguration as well.
Awesome.
And I did I guess 4 nights. For each of the convention and 4 nights of the inauguration, and I knew very, very little about politics. I don't know that I had ever watched more than a few minutes of a convention ever, and that was part, I think, of the reason that it worked, was that I was genuinely mystified by much of what I saw. By what theater it is, I think. I mean, I had this idea that, sort of, I don't know, that things were more organic than they were. For example, I was just blown away to see hand carts, dollies, of huge stacks of campaign signs be brought in. I had this idea. I mean, now you can tell when you look. You can certainly see that they all look the same, and I guess you could at that time too. But I thought people brought their own kid. They made them in their garage with spray paint because they were so enthusiastic. Never occurred to me that the campaign itself brought them in. Well, how phony is that? That's like a thank you on your receipt from Burger King. It really, a lot of it is such theater. And the other thing is, anybody who talks during the day, no one is listening. They try to put the camera so you can't tell as a viewer on television. But somebody who has like a day slot speaking or early evening speaking at the convention, not one person on the convention floor is listening to them. They all just sort of are in conversation and doing whatever. Around 8 o'clock or so, they stop being rude. But before that, they pay no attention. So to have an early speaking spot is more like, I don't know, going through the spanking tunnel or so. There's something punitive about it. It's like a horrible thing. I guess they do it to sort of forge themselves or something, so that nothing that happens can bother them.
Yeah, why do they have to be so stinking long? It doesn't make sense. No,
it doesn't make sense. It's very odd.
Yeah,
the whole thing is very odd. But anyways, it was really fun to do, and it did culminate in being able to go cover the. To be able to cover the inauguration, which was also really, really fun.
How much?
I remember the Tonight Show. They were annoyed that I didn't get an interview with Bill Clinton. And I finally just said to them right on the air, it's the inauguration.
He's busy.
It's the inauguration of the President of the United States. Maybe that's more important than the Tonight Show. Maybe.
How much did you actually work with Jay Leno, or did they just kind of turn you loose when you were out there to do your own thing?
They inadvertently turned me loose. The truth is, if I did that same thing now, or if anybody, and I'm sure they've had roving reporter kind of stuff since then. But the timing of what happened was, Jay had just gotten the Tonight Show. Mm-hmm. Helen Kushnick, who was his manager and became the executive producer or whatever on the Tonight Show, was still with him. And they really had just arrived, and they didn't yet have their sea legs. And they were, I think, so overwhelmed by what they had to do to run this, 4 or 5 night a week show, which is a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
That once they got me, they didn't have time to really pay attention. Mm-hmm. And so I got to do whatever I wanted. And NBC had gotten us, or the Tonight Show, I guess, had gotten us credentials for the convention floor. But the problem is, credentials for the convention floor come in different gradations. Mm-hmm. There are some where, you can go near the building. And then there's stronger credentials where you can go down on the convention floor, right? Mm-hmm. NBC, or the Tonight Show, or whoever it was so powerless at the time that they got me the most useless credentials. So I could barely get in the building with what they had. So my manager and I, whom we were the only two, we borrowed news cameras to do it. I mean, we had no crew, we had no staff. It was just me and my manager. And we would spend the day networking to get better credentials. In fact, usually I dress up to go on stage, but there's one of the appearances that I did where I'm just in like a short sleeve shirt and a denim jacket because I didn't have time to get back to the hotel in between networking to get better credentials. And so they couldn't so the Tonight Show itself couldn't complain when they talked to me. They couldn't say, well, we didn't know what you were going to do, or blah, 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 or you have to tell us what you're going to do, because we couldn't know what we were going to do because we couldn't figure out how close we could get. And in the end, we brought them some pretty darn good stuff. It was really, really fun. In fact, I believe I used to use Maria Shriver's headset, and there's some sort of thing that clicked around your waist. And let me tell you, I was pretty thin back then, and it was still about 4 inches too small for me. She was a wafer-thin person. But anyways, yeah, it was really a fun time and very adventurous, especially because I knew nothing about all of this.
And it's perfect preparation for what you're doing at Birchmere. Before you go,
it is actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. I became more and more confident during this process where I really couldn't control the fact that I didn't know what I was going to say. Where it's the playground of what I do. It is the heart and soul of what I do. Is the part of just talking to the crowd and not really knowing where things are going to. I just have a certain confidence after 37 years of doing this job that I'll stumble on somebody who's really fun to talk to. And by the way, that's 99.9% of the people who come through the door.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. You're more than generous with your time and hilarious as always.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.